I want to welcome you all to the Understanding LIHEAP Performance Measures webinar. Today, this is a 1-hour webinar, and I want to remind everyone that it is being recorded. On your control panel for the GoToWebinar, you'll see a handout. These are the slides that we'll be reviewing today, so if you'd like to download it directly from this control panel, you can do so to either follow along during the webinar or to have afterwards. Today's presenters, if you want to go to the next slide, Patrice West will be introducing the webinar, and then I'll be speaking on behalf of Prize today, and Heather Jones will be joining us to speak on behalf of the state of Missouri. So with that, we have about an hour, so I want to get it turned over to Patrice.
Well, thank you everyone for calling into the webinar today. My name is Patrice West. I am the Regional Liaison from Office of Community Service, Division of Energy Assistance Program for Regions 1, 5, and 10. I am substituting in right now for Kate Thomas, also for Region 6 for the state. But I wanted to bring you some information on the updates for Performance Data Form. OCS is happy to announce that OMB recently reapproved the Performance Data Form for the expiration date of March the 31st of 2021. Grantees are encouraged to submit their final report as soon as possible. And OCS is awaiting approval to issue an AT with the due date for the FY 2017 PDF. The expected due date to submit the form in OLDC is April the 30th, but we have not confirmed that just as yet. So as soon as that will be available, we will make sure that it is given out to everyone to submit that information through OLDC. There are no changes in reporting items from the FY 2016 Performance Data Form. And if we can go to the next slide. And we just wanted to remind everyone that there are resources available to everyone, and continue to reach out to your OCS liaison. As I stated earlier, I am covering the region for Kate Thomas right now, so Region 6, if you could reach out to us, but also to use the link as the OCS liaisons are identified there per region. You have the LIHEAP Virtual Library and a Prize webinars that give great information. So on that, I would like to turn it back over to Melissa, and we will continue on with the webinar.
Great. Thank you, Patrice. So many of you who were at the national training last year or who listened to webinars at this time last year know that we've really started talking a lot about using and understanding the data that you are submitting. And so in previous training, we looked at understanding this data through your form. So we kind of systematically looked at your form to find patterns and themes in your data. Well, now, today, what we want to do is use the Performance Management State Snapshot. This is a tool many of you received last year and will receive again this year, to walk through and pull out takeaways from your data. And obviously we have an hour and we're going to go through 2 state examples. So these are things that you can go through and identify fairly quickly as kind of alerts and areas that you can dig in further. And so we're going to, hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will understand how to use the snapshot to understand your 4 primary LIHEAP performance outcomes, and we're going to go over those. We want you to feel more comfortable using the snapshot to identify patterns in your data where more attention or evaluation might be needed. And then we want you to obviously leave knowing where to find additional resources. And so the way we're going to do this is I'm going to start by walking through a state's performance management data or performance measure data using the snapshot, and we'll identify some key takeaways. Heather Jones from Missouri is going to kind of do the same thing with her own data, and then we'll go over and briefly review existing and some new performance management resources available to everyone. So we'll jump right into part 1. I want to give a big thanks to Idaho, who is letting us use their 2016 data as an example. So thank you. I know you're on the call today. For those of you who may not have received the snapshot or need a reminder as to what that is, this is a tool that was designed by your peers in the Performance Management Implementation Work Group in partnership with a Prize. And the purpose of the tool is to make it easier for you to kind of pull out the key pieces of your performance data form report. And it's done in all tables and just some key text so that you're not having to hunt and dig into your data to try and find patterns. This kind of pulls it right out onto the page for you. And that's what we're going to use today to walk through the data. Something new this year is the executive summary, and so this will be on the front of every snapshot this year that you receive after you submit your data. And what it does is it really just highlights whether or the key 4 performance measures. And for those of you who might be new to this, we have 2 energy burden measures. So we look at how you're targeting benefits and how you're reducing burden. And then we have prevention and restoration measures. So are you preventing home energy loss, or are you restoring home energy for those people who've already lost it? And so this executive summary just kind of pops that right off of the page and says, how you're doing and what you're doing. And so we're going to use Idaho to start to walk through this executive summary. So at the very top of the executive summary, you're going to see the benefit targeting outcome. And keep in mind, this is all about, does LIHEAP furnish higher benefits to higher burden households? And I want to actually jump down to the bottom as to why this is important. Keep in mind, this is the one piece of the statute that tells us what we need to do, right? So we understand that grantees need to be providing the highest level of energy assistance to those people with the highest energy burden, which is income in relation to energy costs, energy costs in relation to income, taking into account family size. And so in Idaho, what we see right away is that, yes, the total LIHEAP benefit received by high burden households was about $44 more than the benefit received by average recipients. And that's in that blue circle in the graph. And so they are targeting benefits to higher burden households. When we go to the next slide, we look at energy burden. Now keep in mind that these are 2 very different things. Benefit targeting means, are we giving more money? But what we're looking at with burden is, are we paying the same or a larger share of the bill for high burden households? And so what we see here is that Idaho is not overall doing this. In 2016, LIHEAP paid 30.6% of the energy bill for average households, while LIHEAP paid 20% of the energy bill for high burden households. And you'll see that in the white box in the graphic. And this is important. For those of you who might remember Yulia Razad, she would always say, you can always, her term was, you can always throw a few extra bucks to high burden households, but is it having the impact you expect it to have? And so here we say in Idaho, although high burden households are getting $44 more, they're having less of their bill paid than average households, and therefore less of their energy burden reduced. So it gives you an idea of the extent to which the LIHEAP benefit is actually reducing household burden. The third and fourth piece we look at in this executive summary are the prevention and restoration of home energy service loss. And so you'll see that we have this broken out by bill payment assistance and equipment repair and replacement in the graphic. And on the right-hand side of the page, we look at the top set of information is prevention, and the bottom is restoration. In Idaho, LIHEAP benefits prevented the loss of service for 2,569 times. And this includes stopping threatened utility disconnections, but also delivering fuels to homes that were at risk of running out of fuel. You can also see that they replaced equipment for 2 households that were at imminent risk of failure. So this was equipment repair and replacement with the outcome of preventing home energy loss. On the other hand, we have restoration. And so in 2016, LIHEAP benefits restored home energy service a little over 3,000 times for households who had been disconnected by their utility provider, and they had, or who had run out of fuel, and they had 35 households who had their inoperable heating equipment or cooling equipment repaired or replaced. So the important piece of this here, and I want to remind everyone, is this is a story in and of itself. We prevented people from losing their home energy. We restored people who had already lost their home energy, but the two combined is an important story as well, right? We know that when people lose home energy, their health risks are increased. We know that they have to pay costly reconnection fees. And so in many states, the goal is to increase prevention relative to restoration. And what you can see in these graphs very clearly is that relationship between the two. In Idaho, what you see here in the top line, especially in bill payment assistance, is that you have a lower percentage of the bill payment assistance resulting in prevention versus restoration. And so that raises a question about what Idaho's goals might be in terms of, do we want to try and get more people, more of these restoration households in the door prior to being disconnected or running out of fuel? And in their equipment repair and replacement, this isn't a big program. And so you can tell this is 37 households overall. This may be something that they rarely do, or it may not be a big piece of their program. But if it is, there is some. This obviously points out that if if their goal is to look at prevention, that they may want to look at this more closely. But like many states, they may only or largely replace only inoperable equipment, in which case this data makes complete sense. So this just kind of spells it out for states as they look at it. The next part of the snapshot digs in a little bit. So this is what you may be familiar with what we did last year. And this is where we look at each of the components in that kind of that big graph that we just looked at. We kind of take each component apart, and it lets us dive in to see why exactly we're seeing what we're seeing. And so we look at income and bill, benefit, energy burden before and after LIHEAP, and the percentage of energy bill paid between average and high burden households. And so we've broken these up two at a time to tell a story. So if you go to the next slide, what you're going to see is average annual income and average total residential energy bill. And keep in mind, these are the two pieces that make up energy bill. Energy burden. Your energy bill divided by income is your energy burden. How much of your income are you paying towards your energy bill? So the reason it's important to look at these two things here is that when you go to look at the difference between high burden and average households, it's important to understand, is that difference a result of lower income, or is it a result of higher energy bills, or both? And when you begin to look at your matrix to see how you're targeting benefits, understanding that is really important. Should we be perhaps changing our income differential, or do we need to be looking more closely at energy costs? If you look at this data here in Idaho, we see that income for high burden households is 54% less, so half of what average households are getting. And the annual energy bill is over 50% greater, 67% greater than average households. So in Idaho, it really is a case of both high or lower income and higher energy bills, and that's why you're seeing such a big difference between average and high burden households. To me, this is always the aha moment that most states have, these two graphs, and I've reversed them for a reason, because what we see, you'll see 1.4 and 1.3, and that's not a typo, because what we see as a result of that income and the energy bill on the previous slide results in figure 1.4, average energy burden before LIHEAP. So average households are paying 9.4% of their income towards energy bills. High burden households are paying 34.6% of their income towards high energy bills, which means that high burden households are paying 3.7 times as much of their income toward energy costs than average households. So when we jump down to 1.3 and we see that high burden households are only getting a 12% higher benefit, even though they're paying 3.7 times as much of their income towards energy bills, that's an aha moment, right? That's a first sign that, maybe we could be looking at how to better take energy burden into consideration in our matrix, and maybe not. I mean, maybe there's more to see here, but it's an important kind of moment to say, what's the difference in what people are paying, and how is that reflected just in our benefit amount? And then this is the last set of the figures in section 1 of the snapshot. And this is an important one, and I think this is also an aha moment for states, but for a completely different reason. Many of you have matrices that were developed before you got there. Even if some of your more experienced coordinators have matrices that they don't really understand, or they're not sure what the intention was behind the matrix when it was designed. For those of you who do know, these two graphs give you a good idea of where you're having an impact. So the first is energy burden after LIHEAP. So after you make the LIHEAP payment or the bill payment assistance, what's the result? How much of people's income are they now paying toward energy bills? And in Idaho's case, average households are paying 6.5% of their income towards energy bills, and high burden households are now paying 27.5%. You also look at percentage of energy bill paid by LIHEAP. That's in figure 1.6. And in this case, average households are having 30% of their bill paid. High burden households are only having 20% of their bill paid. For some grantees, the goal of their matrix, or the goal even of their whole program, is to bring all LIHEAP households down to a maximum or a manageable energy burden level. So we want, after LIHEAP, we want everyone to be paying only X% of their income towards energy costs. And figure 1.5 would be the graph they would use to see if they're achieving that goal. Other grantees say, you know what, our goal is that we want to pay a specific or a minimum percentage of the bill for all LIHEAP households. So our goal is to pay 20% of the bill across all households, or maybe even a little more towards high burden. And that's what figure 1.6 tells you, right? So in this case, you would see that in Idaho, if their goal was to pay 25% of the bill for all households, this shows you really quickly, are we achieving that? So the remainder of the LIHEAP Performance Management State Snapshot provides grantees with detailed statistics broken out by fuel type. This lets us dig in one step further to begin to see patterns. So there are a few things that we can look here. This is the average annual total LIHEAP benefit. And what we want to look at here is, does LIHEAP furnish higher benefits to higher burden households across all fuel types? And what we see here is that that's not the case. Even though you can look in the all column in the very left-hand side and see that the overarching pattern is that, yes, Idaho is paying more money to high burden households on average, but when you begin to break it out by fuel type, you see this fuel oil and other fuels have a different pattern. In the case of fuel oil, households are receiving the same benefit. In the case of other fuels, high burden households are actually receiving less of a benefit. And so that raises some questions about looking at your matrix in that area, and also asking some questions about delivery, and we'll point that out here in a second. The second one that we're highlighting here is figure 2.6. This is the percentage of bill paid, and this gets at that other performance outcome. Are we paying the same share of bill for high burden and average households? And the answer is no. Across the board, you can see here that high burden households had less of their energy bill paid with LIHEAP than average households, regardless of their fuel type. But there are two things that should stick out on this page to you. The first is that even average households, there's a big variance in the percentage of bill paid across fuel types. So if you look at the gray bar across the board, fuel oil households are having over half of their bill paid, whereas natural gas households are having less than a quarter. So regardless of the high burden average difference, you can see some patterns here that Idaho may want to look at and say, is that our intention? Are we meaning to do that? Perhaps we have other funding that supplements LIHEAP for electric and natural gas, which is why they get a lower LIHEAP benefit. There may be a bunch of reasons, but it's something to kind of pay attention to. The other is that the difference between, can you take one step back? Thank you. The other is that the difference between high burden and average household varies across fuel types. So you'll see these circles here. So in fuel oil, there's really only a 30% difference between what high burden and average households are getting in terms of the share of their bill paid. but in propane, that difference is much larger. It's a 47% difference. So the two things that Idaho could look at here is, first of all, are we meaning to vary the percentage of bill paid so much between fuel types? And then the second question is, within each fuel type, are we wanting to vary this benefit so that we're actually reducing a greater share of high burden households' energy burden? Okay, now you can move on to the next. So the last chart we're going to look at here for Idaho is the prevention and restoration of home energy loss, and this is broken out by fuel type. I want to point out that we're only looking at bill payment assistance here. We're not looking at the equipment repair and replacement. And the question is, are the patterns that we saw in all of the data, regardless of fuel type, do they hold true for across individual fuel types? And what we see here is that there's some variation. And actually, to be honest, it's something that I didn't expect to see. In many cases in states, we'll see that deliverable fuels have more restoration than prevention, because in some cases people, for example, won't get deliverable fuels during the summertime, especially like fuel oil. And so you'll see people come in the fall who are already out of fuel to begin with. And so we generally see kind of this opposite pattern, but in Idaho, that's not the case. What we see is that in electricity, fuel oil, and propane, prevention, bill payment assistance resulted in more preventions in relation to restoration. Not the case with natural gas and other fuels, where you see much bigger restoration numbers. And so these are just things to pay attention to. Why are we seeing differences in patterns in terms of how these bill payment assistance benefits are resulting in restorations versus preventions? And if each of these restorations has a reconnection fee or deposit associated with them, how do we reduce that and make sure people are coming in before their energy is disconnected or before they run out of fuel? So what I've done here in the next two slides is I've just said, okay, and I want to point out it's 12:22, so we've spent 15 minutes going over just some very high-level graphs, and we've come up with 5 or 6 key findings. And I said, okay, so if I was sitting in a coordinator, if I was in my cubicle or in my office and I had come up with these 5 or 6 key findings, what would I do next with it? What would I do with this? And so this is what I typed out. The first thing, as we pointed out, that high burden households in Idaho paid 3.7 times as much of their income toward energy costs as average households. However, they only received an 11% higher benefit. So the next question is to dig into your matrix. And I'm making the assumption that many of us aren't quite sure what our matrix is doing, or if we do, that we could maybe take a further look to see how are we trying to target higher benefits to higher burden households. Is our matrix actually doing what we think it should be doing, or what we want it to do, and if not, why? So that seems like a basic question, right? But what we're experiencing and hearing in the field from people is, some really smart nerd in my office, several years ago devised this matrix, and I had no idea. I have no idea what we're trying to do. And so encourage y'all to take a look at it and say, why are we seeing this result? The second line is that high burden and average fuel oil households received equal benefits in 2016, and other fuels households like wood received a lower benefit. And so there are 2 questions that immediately pop to mind. And the first is, does our current benefit matrix accurately reflect income and energy cost differences among deliverable fuel households? We know that deliverable fuel prices are variable, and they change sometimes dramatically. And so has that been kind of trued up in recent years? And looking at this data gives you a good opportunity to look at actual costs and say, what, these aren't accurately reflected in our benefit matrix. But what we're also seeing in states is that sometimes it has nothing to do with the matrix. The matrix may actually be designed to do what it's supposed to be doing or should be doing, but there are benefit determination procedures or payment processes that kind of get in the way of the matrix working. So for example, in a state where, in Idaho's case, for example, if you have to bring in receipts for reimbursement in order to receive your full benefit, or if there's some other procedure, their clients may not be accessing the full benefit or the maximum benefit that's available because of a procedure or a policy or a process that's getting in the way. And so I'd encourage you to look beyond your matrix. You know, it's important to look at it, but look beyond it as well to see if maybe there's something getting in the way of it actually being effective. On the next page, the third thing we found is that for all households, both average and high burden, the percentage of bill paid with LIHEAP varies considerably between fuel types. So that's where we saw that over 50% of fuel oil households' bills are being paid, but only 20 or 30% of propane bills are being paid. And so is it our intention to vary the percentage of bills we paid based on fuel type? My guess is no, but there may be a reason that your state does this. For example, as I mentioned, in some of your states, you have fuel funds that supplement LIHEAP, and so you may be wanting to give a higher percentage of the bill paid by LIHEAP to deliverable fuels that don't have those resources. But it's important to find out what it is you want to do, and I think that what these performance measures do is kind of force you to take a look at that and say, what is our goal? And then, does our benefit matrix reflect that, or do we need to adjust it in order to meet our goal? The other thing we found is that compared to average households, high burden households across all fuel types have a lesser share of their energy bill paid with LIHEAP. So once again, this is a question of goals. Is it our expectation that all households will have an equal share of their bill paid? Is our goal, for example, to pay 20% of the bill for all households regardless of fuel type or energy burden? Or should higher burden households have a higher share of their bill paid? That's a question that we can't answer for you. That's an internal philosophical question that you need to answer with your network, and maybe you already have. And if you have, is your matrix designed to reflect that expectation? And then we talked about in 2016, bill payment assistance used to pay natural gas and other fuel benefits resulted in more occurrences of restoration relative to prevention. So this is the first question is, why is that happening, and do we expect that to be happening? Is there a reason we know that's happening? That's something that a prize can't answer sitting several miles away from Idaho. But Idaho can look at it and say, gosh, is this a pattern that we expect to see? And if it's not, how do we address this or find out why it's happening? Why are more natural gas and other fuel households waiting until they're disconnected or out of fuel to access LIHEAP? And how can we work with local partners and utilities to encourage households to apply sooner? So those are some possible next questions that you could be asking. So we came away with 5 key findings that really kind of give you some insight and will give Idaho a chance to say, where do we take this next? What do we need to keep looking at? And some very pointed areas, the other fuels, the fuel oil, the natural gas prevention and restoration, and the other fuel restoration and prevention, some very targeted areas that they can begin looking at to move forward. So I'm going to pass this to Heather Jones, who's going to walk through her data as a coordinator and kind of talk through the way she thought about her data as she was looking at these same graphs.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody today. As a member of the Performance Management Implementation Work Group, working with other grantees, a part of this work group that Melissa mentioned, you know, something that we're really trying to do is develop tools so that we can all understand our data better. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into Missouri so we have enough time if people have questions about what's happened with our data. And this is 2017 data that we are displaying. Even though we haven't turned it in yet, we were able to get this information together for the webinar. So the first thing, the question that Melissa asked is, does LIHEAP furnish higher benefits to higher burden households? In Missouri, no, they don't. Look at the 2 blue circles. And I really split that kind of between the blue circles and on the left-hand side and over, and then the other are the formulas. Because if you have the 3 main things to think about, income, their energy bill, and our benefit that we're paying, the rest of those formulas to the right are really derivatives of what we're seeing in those first 3 data elements. So for me as a coordinator, it's the formulas that I sometimes get lost going, now what am I looking at? Am I looking at burden? Am I looking at reduction? And am I looking at, are we targeting high burden households, and how does this all fit together? And so keeping those formulas there right in front of me to tell me every step of the way what I'm utilizing out of those 3 data elements to get to those points has been extremely helpful in me understanding the whole process better and understanding the data. But we actually pay $26 less for our high burden households than we do all other households in the state of Missouri. So we also, if you move to that first formula as far as are we paying a larger share of their home energy bill for high burden households? No, we're not. So we're a little bit different than Idaho. All of us are going to look different. We paid 43% of our average household energy bill, where for high burden households, we only paid 28.2% or a third. So we are not meeting those objectives on either case, but it gives you an idea that now that we've looked at this, that maybe we need to take a look at what we're doing. So if we go to the next page. So understanding it, and then the next part of that executive summary or executive snapshot is when you look at restoration and preventative measures, and Melissa and I both talk about this, that this is an important component of the performance management information that we're reporting. So we prevented loss of services in bill-assisted homes of 85,294 households. Now, I want to note those are occurrences, because if you look at our total household size, of course, that's going to be different. But under our crisis program, people are allowed to apply for that crisis program and for payment several times during the winter and even summer. And then we also repaired or replaced 65 households with cooling or heating equipment because they were at imminent risk of losing that. And so the same thing if we look at restoration, our restoration was 15,794 times for the bill-assisted, and then we did 90 households. And our repair replacement is a much smaller program, but we do restoration and prevention for both of those. And like I said, again, going back to Missouri and how we set up our program, for you even to get crisis assistance, like many states define, you have to have a disconnect, be terminated, or almost out of your deliverable fuel to tap into that additional resource in our program beyond the minimum heating assistance benefit. So seeing that many occurrences wasn't a real surprise to me, although some people say, wow, that looks like a lot of numbers. It's each time they came in, it's not each household, and they do come in multiple times if they need assistance throughout the winter and summer. So if we go to the next slide, this kind of breaks down, and I'll be honest with you, when I go through this presentation and when I was looking back and forth my data, having my performance management snapshot executive summary with all the formulas on it makes it a whole lot easier for me to step through this process, plus listening to Melissa's presentation. The one thing I can not say strongly enough is you have to go over it a lot, many times, and the repetition, every time you go over it and have that data in front of you, and when it's your own state's data, things start clicking a lot better for you. So I really encourage you, take that time, close the door, pour over it, take the time and really see what your program's doing. So the average income in Missouri between high average households and high burden households, the average household is 12,304, as you can see, and the high burden households are 4,000, which is 61% less. So we can see that in Missouri, like Idaho, both the annual income and the annual energy bill, because again, here we have the high burden households are paying on average 41% greater than the average household, that it's a combination of both. When I first got my data and saw the difference between the average households and high burden households on income, I really tuned into that because I was like, that's a significant difference, and what kind of control do we have over that? But something I'm looking at is what's the variance in our benefit matrix between our very low income and the higher end of our income federal poverty rate as to how we pay out benefits. So the next slide we look at is where Melissa's kind of flipped that, and I think it's really important that you look at your energy burden before LIHEAP. And again, you have to define that energy burden as the energy bill over annual income. And when you're looking at the data, I always go back to the formulas because it helps me bring it in and click it in. So our average household, we're paying, we're reducing their energy burden is 5.7% before LIHEAP, and for our high burden, it's 20%. And then again, we go and give, it's unfortunate, a lower benefit to our high burden households, and so they actually are receiving less than the average household. So they have more energy burden and they're getting less of a LIHEAP payment. So that's, of course, leading to some of what's happening in our targeting or benefit reduction in our paying a larger share of their energy burden. So if we go to the next slide, then when we see it after LIHEAP, the LIHEAP helps, but it doesn't help enough. It drops our average households down to 3.2%, but our high burden households are still at 15%, which, like Melissa was pointing out, is still 4.6 times more of their income goes towards their energy costs than our average household. And the percentage of the energy bill that we're actually being paid by LIHEAP, which is that LIHEAP benefit over your energy bill, or your LIHEAP benefit divided by your energy bill. Again, we're covering about 43% on average households through the whole LIHEAP program, but only 28%. So they would have a 35% less of their energy bill paid with LIHEAP than the average household. So that's what we're seeing here. So understanding our performance measurements, we take a look at, if we break it down and we actually start looking across different fuel types, we can ask, does LIHEAP furnish higher benefits to higher burden households across all fuel types? No. However, natural gas households receive $11 or 4% greater benefit than average natural gas households. And similarly, high burden propane households receive $58 or 17% greater benefits. However, electric's high burden households receive $71 less. And so when Melissa was talking about, when you just look at the benefits and then you start breaking them out by fuel source, you can actually see where we're hitting the high burden households in propane and natural gas just barely on the natural gas. Electric we're not coming very close to, and then that's bringing our overall average down. And is that intentional, and is that something we need to take a look at and maybe look at our benefit matrix again, or the way we're targeting households? So do we pay more of the energy bill for high burden households across all fuel types? No, again. High burden households in Missouri had less of their energy bill paid with LIHEAP than average households, regardless of the fuel type. However, when you look at the extent of the difference of variances by fuel types, there's a 52% difference between the electric high burden and average household. However, there's only an 11% difference between natural gas and average households. So you can see just visually and also through the percentages that not only are we paying that average household more, but even by fuel type, there's a great variance between the two, between all three of them, really. So that's something that we need to ask questions about and talk about and look at. So then we get to Missouri State Snapshot as far as prevention and restoration, and you will see that we do, on all households, do more prevention than restoration. And these are the bill-assisted payments. This does not include equipment repair and replacement. But you'll notice that we do more prevention in electricity than we do natural gas, and then propane kind of falls a little bit in between the two. And the interesting thing about the electric is, my guess is, and this is just something looking at the data, is people keep their electric on year-round, and so they don't let it go over the summer. We do have a summer program. We do keep people's power on, and electric's powering more than just their heating or cooling equipment, as we well know. And so I think there's more of a sense of urgency in keeping the electricity on, whereas natural gas, like Melissa was pointing out, that some of us have seen this, and I've certainly heard this from our suppliers that provide natural gas in our state, that a lot of people let that gas bill go as we get into warmer temperatures if it's only being used for their heating, because they're focusing their limited resources to paying other things. And so sometimes the gas gets shut off. And again, Melissa's right, there is a reconnection fee. There is a cost to the household. What can we do to look and do a better job on that? And so I think that might be part of it. I was surprised by propane because I thought it would be very similar to natural gas, that it would be lower. However, I think some people in propane, they're coming in when that gets below 20%. So we have that threshold, and that's actually bringing them in before they have a disconnection or before they run out of fuel. Knowing that, again, on propane, you're going to have fuel checks, pressure checks, and there's going to be an additional associated cost to that. So that's what Missouri is taking away from them. These are 2017, and I'll be turning in here shortly now that we know we can report this through OLDC. Again, I would encourage you, look at your three data elements. I'm going to go back over them: your average energy bill, your average income per year, and your average benefit. Look at those, and then have the formulas next to you as you go through your state snapshots and executive summaries to understand the difference between how much of the bill are we paying for, what was it before, their burden before and after, and kind of getting those things straight, because I think that can make a really big difference for you understanding and feeling more comfortable in understanding your data, and more importantly, sharing that with stakeholders in your state so you can start having those conversations around questions that you have. Why is it showing us this? So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Melissa. Thank you.
Great. So we moved through that really fast, but we understand that, as Heather said, it's a matter of you taking a look at it, and our goal is to continually hear from you so that we can make these resources pop off the page even more. What are some immediate takeaways? I think the one thing that, if you hear anything today, it's that none of these resources are going to tell the whole story, because we don't have the whole story, right? You have the context, your local agencies, your clients have the context needed to understand why you're seeing what you're seeing. What it does, though, is it raises some flags. It kind of says, hey, take a look at me. Is this what you want to be seeing? Is this what you're intending to do? And if it's not, where along the path are things going south, or are things maybe diverging from what your intentions are? And then how do you walk backwards and fix it? And Heather and I, for a long time, have been on many committees, and one of the things that we always tell new coordinators is that you can't go in and fix it all at once, right? So we pointed out 5 things with Idaho or so that they could be looking at, and maybe their goal for this year is to take a look at one of them. We're going to look at the fuel oil households, because we see that they're getting a much bigger benefit. Is that what we want? And let's take a look at that part of our matrix, or whatever. But the idea here is that the point of this is to bring forth kind of these key pieces that you can be looking at, so that you're not having to be swimming in all of this data. And one of the resources, if you want to go to the next slide, that we have been working on with Heather and other members of the Performance Measures Implementation Workgroup is this communications guide. And the purpose of this resource is to help you interpret and share LIHEAP performance management data with various partners and stakeholders. Now, I'll be honest, the first part, or the first intention, was to help you communicate with stakeholders. But what we found in putting together the materials was that by talking to other people about your data, you end up learning about it yourself. And so what this contains, this communications guide will contain, is the state snapshot, including the executive summary. So it's the graphs that we just walked through, plus others. We just highlighted a few of the tables in that report. We've also put together example letters to home energy vendors, subgrantees, and legislators and leaders. So they all have a different tone. They all have kind of different messages, but it lets you kind of, it's not quite a Mad Lib, but almost. It lets you fill in the blanks with your own state data. It's got all the language there to help you understand what it is, some key points you could be talking about. But we've given you the form, the place on the form where you can pull the data right from and plug it into those letters and use it to talk with people about your data. And then we're also putting together, it's almost done, a slide deck for trainings and presentations that you can pull slides from if you'd like, kind of similar to what we just did, but you would plug your own data into it, and then you can go ahead and share it with folks, whichever slides you want. And this says link here, so we'll make sure to update that. But this is all going to be available on the Performance Management tab of the LIHEAP Performance Management website. So I want to underscore that there's a lot of resources out there for folks. The Performance Management website, the link is here. The website and the data warehouse, all of these graphs that we've gone through, or most of the graphs that we've gone through, are now going to be available on the data warehouse. So you'll have a snapshot that kind of pulls key things together, but you'll also be able to go in and dynamically pull these reports right out of the data warehouse using a guided search, or I think it's just a guided search at this point. So go on in and be able to pull all of that. And I've put upcoming training next because in May, in a few weeks, we're all going to be in Washington, D.C. for the national training. And we're going to do some more of this work, but we're going to use those tables from the data warehouse. So we're going to build upon what we did today, help you walk through other states' data, maybe your own, through the data warehouse. We also have a lot of technical assistance available. We've worked with a lot of you. I want to highlight that some of you are new and you're sitting here going, oh my gosh, you're already talking about using data, but I'm still working on just getting it or reporting it. And I want to just underscore that we know that and that we're here and we are still available to help you with collecting data in your systems or from your intake workers and clients. We're still here to help you with reporting that data, getting it into OLDC. There are lots of resources available online, but we're also available to help you one-on-one with that and encourage you to give us a call. We've also put the link to the virtual library here, so there are a lot of resources on that as well. But I guess I want to encourage you that we understand there are multiple pieces of performance management: collecting data, reporting data, understanding the data, which is kind of where we're at right now, and then using the data for improving and changing your program. And we understand that everyone is at multiple, in some cases, phases. You know, you want to use the data you have, but you're still working on collecting more. We're here to help you with all phases, encourage you to get in touch with us regardless of where you're at if you need help. We have some contact information here for all of us. You're welcome to contact any of us. All three of us plus David Carroll will be at the national training in Washington, D.C. So if you want some time with us, go ahead and let us know. Maybe we can schedule some meeting times, but you're also welcome to just email or call us at any time. I'd like to open it up for questions. Jorge, do you want to walk people through that?
Yes, Marisa, thanks. So you can ask a question through your phone if you called in, or you can enter a question into the box in the GoToWebinar panel. If you called in, just make sure to dial in your audio pin into your phone so that I can unmute you and you can ask your question. Oh, and we have a question that was typed into the box. The question is, hi, is there an audio pin? And in the screen, you can see that the audio pin is listed in the GoToWebinar app under the phone or under the call-in information.
Okay, so someone typed in, how can I get the resources you used for my state? So if you submitted 2016 data that was completed, then you should have gotten this snapshot sent to you last year. If you did not get it or would like to know if you got it or would like it resent, you can contact us at Apprise. For 2017, once your data is complete and has been reviewed by Apprise and checked over, your snapshot, and Dan and the folks at Apprise can correct me if I'm wrong, your snapshot will be made available on the performance management tab on the performance management website. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, we're working on that now, and we'll be showing that at the national training.
Great. So I have a request actually to make of all of you. As we prepare for the national training, we want to make sure that we are covering things that that might not make sense to you, or that you need us to go over again, or maybe something didn't quite you didn't quite understand something and you'd like to hear more about it. And I'd encourage you to reach out to us via the email or phone call and let us know, something you'd really like us to make sure we cover in a little more detail, for example, or something that maybe we missed that you're interested in learning about. We've got a lot of our materials ready, but we can make sure that we're covering something a little differently, or making sure that we are addressing things that you want to hear more about in the national training. So I encourage you to reach out.
Melissa, we have one more typed in question.
Okay.
And the question is, are we required to convert our energy to BTUs?
Yes, for the optional measures so for those of you who are not doing that, the optional measures are, I forget what part they are actually. I don't have the form right in front of me, but you are asked to convert your the consumption into BTUs, and there's a calculator available on the performance management website. Dan, do you know where that's at? I think it's under grantee resources.
Yes, it's under grantee resources on the performance management website. It has instructions in it on how to put your information in to get the conversion completed. And if you have any questions about that, you can contact myself or Kevin McGrath, and we're happy to help walk you through that.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, I think I'm gonna go ahead and we'll wrap up. But if you think of questions, or as you're walking through these slides you don't quite understand something, or you want to go into something in more detail, please feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email, and we're happy to go over it with you. And with that, I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you for joining us.